There is a small mountain village in Dagestan, Russia, called Sildi. Most people have never heard of it. It sits high in the Caucasus Mountains, far from any city, far from any camera, far from anything the rest of the world would call important. The roads are rough, the winters are brutal. Life there is hard in a way that most people will never understand. And it was here, in this forgotten corner of the world, that a story began which would eventually reach 2.4 million households on a single October night and change the sport of mixed martial arts forever. But before we talk about the son, we have to talk about the father. Because without the father, none of this exists. His name was Khabib Nurmagomedov. He was born in Dagestan during the Soviet era, grew up in the mountains the same way his ancestors did, hard work, discipline, and not much else. As a young man, he served in the Soviet army, and when he came back, he brought something with him that most soldiers don't bring home: a mission. Khabib had trained in judo and sambo during his military years, and he came back to Dagestan with one clear idea in his head. He was going to teach the children of his region how to fight. The region had a serious problem with Islamic extremism, and Khabib believed that sport was the answer. He converted the ground floor of his family's two-story home into a gym. He charged nothing. He just coached. For years, he coached. He became a senior coach for the combat sambo national team in the Republic of Dagestan and trained hundreds of athletes. But there was one athlete coming who would change everything, and that athlete was his own son. Khabib Abdulmanapovich Nurmagomedov was born on the 20th of September, 1988. He was born in Sildi, the same mountain village his family came from, and he spent his earliest years in a household that was equal parts family home and training facility. His cousins trained there, his brothers were there, the wrestling mats were always occupied. From the time he was old enough to understand what was happening around him, the world Khabib lived in had one language, and that language was grappling. He started wrestling at 8 years old under his father's direct instruction. Not just any instruction, his father was demanding in a way that went beyond normal coaching. Khabib was, by his own admission, a dictator with his son. He pushed harder, expected more, and accepted nothing less than everything Khabib had. And Khabib responded not by breaking, but by wanting more. When his father said rest, Khabib somehow heard work harder. When his father said enough, Khabib was already preparing for what came next. At 9 years old, in a story that would later astonish the world when it came out, Khabib wrestled a bear, a real bear. His father arranged it, believing that if his son could handle the unpredictability of an animal that large, he could handle anything a human opponent could bring. In 2001, the family moved to Makhachkala, the capital of Dagestan. Khabib was 12 years old. He continued wrestling, added judo at 15, then returned to combat sambo under his father at 17. The transition between disciplines was not always easy. Moving from wrestling to judo meant competing in a GI jacket, a completely different feel, and the adjustment was difficult. But Khabib wanted his son to be complete. Not good at one thing, complete. And so Khabib learned everything. He also got into street fights regularly during his teenage years, something he would later talk about openly, not with pride, but with honesty. Khabib eventually channeled everything into the mat and kept it there. By the time Khabib turned 20, he had already begun competing professionally in mixed martial arts. His debut was in September 2008. He won. He won again. He kept winning. Over the next 3 years, competing in the regional circuits of Russia and Ukraine, he went undefeated. 16 wins, 0 losses. His style was unlike anything most opponents had encountered. He used wrestling and judo to take people down, and then once he had them on the ground, he made them suffer. Not with big punches or flashy submissions, but with relentless grinding pressure. His weight on an opponent felt like something more than a person. Former champions and commentators would later struggle to find words for it. He simply crushed people, not dramatically, methodically, like he had all the time in the world and he was going to use every second of it. In late 2011, the UFC noticed. They signed him to a 6-fight deal, and in January 2012, in Nashville, Tennessee, Khabib Nurmagomedov made his UFC debut against Kamal Shaloris and won by submission in the 3rd round. He was 23 years old, English was still new to him, and he was fighting in a country he had arrived in only recently. What followed was years of dominance broken up by injury after injury. 5 times the UFC tried to book Khabib against Tony Ferguson. 5 times the fight fell apart. Injuries, illness, a freak accident with a knee, a canceled weight cut, a lung issue on Ferguson's side, and then a global pandemic that grounded planes and trapped Khabib in Russia. 5 attempts, 0 fights. While the Ferguson fight kept collapsing, Khabib kept winning everyone else. He dismantled Michael Johnson so completely at UFC 205 that he was shouting at Dana White ringside to give him a title shot while he was still doing it. He destroyed Edson Barboza in December 2017 in a performance so one-sided that the MMA world ran out of new ways to describe what they were watching. And then, in April 2018, in Brooklyn, New York, against a last-minute replacement named Al Iaquinta, Khabib Nurmagomedov won the UFC lightweight championship. He was 29 years old. His father was in the crowd. The son who had wrestled a bear at 9 years old was now the best lightweight fighter on the planet. Then came October 6, 2018. Las Vegas, Nevada. 2.4 million people paid to watch. It remains the highest-selling event in the history of mixed martial arts. His opponent was Conor McGregor, the loudest, most famous, most polarizing fighter the sport had ever produced. McGregor had spent months saying everything he could think of to get inside Khabib's head. He talked about his religion, his country, his father, his teammates. He did everything a trash talker does when he's trying to make a fight personal. Khabib walked into that octagon in Las Vegas and did what he always did. He took McGregor down. He pressed him against the cage. He made him carry his weight. And in the 4th round, he locked in a neck crank and McGregor tapped out. After the fight, in the chaos that followed, Khabib jumped the cage and went after one of McGregor's corner team who had been shouting insults throughout the night. The brawl that followed cost him a 9-month suspension and $500,000. He said later that some things are worth more than money. He said you cannot talk about a man's religion and his nation and expect nothing back. He came back and defended his title twice more. Against Dustin Poirier in Abu Dhabi in September 2019, where he won by rear naked choke in the 3rd round and then sold Poirier's shirt after the fight and donated $100,000 to charity, matching dollar for dollar by Dana White. And then fight, something happened that changed everything. In May 2020, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov was hospitalized after contracting COVID-19 following heart surgery. He was placed in a medically induced coma. For weeks, the family waited. Khabib flew to be near him. On July 3, 2020, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov died in a Moscow clinic at 57 years old. The man who had built the gym on the ground floor of his family home, who had coached hundreds of children to keep them away from everything dangerous, who had been both father and dictator and trainer and best friend to his son, was gone. 3 months later, Khabib stepped into the octagon one more time. He had promised his mother one last fight. He told her it would be his last, and he told her he would win.